I'll start the show with a brief introduction of the character who, today, especially to my youngest viewers, may not be quite so recognizable. Dolph Lundgren is a Swedish actor, director, and martial arts practitioner who was mainly famous for his roles in action movies. His star shone the brightest in the 80s and 90s when he would play in the largest productions alongside the most famous names of the contemporary cinematography. It was rare for him to play the main role, though. His typical role was a movie villain and nemesis, in which he was helped by his huge dimensions, square jaw, and dispassionate, downright apathetic gaze. Lundgren was born on the 3rd of November 1957 in Stockholm, Sweden. His full name was Hans Lundgren, and the nickname Dolph was given to him by one of his teachers. He probably gained the most notoriety thanks to the role of Ivan Drago, the Soviet boxer in the movie Rocky IV from 1985, in which he performed alongside Sylvester Stallone. The image of an evil pumped full of steroids out of cattle syringes was back then at least as media-worthy as it is today. Lundgren also played the Universal Soldier movie series as well as in the Expendables movie series, in which he played alongside such stars as Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Jason Statham. When it comes to Lundgren's physique in his best years, it definitely stood out among the contemporary actors and was actually closer to the world of bodybuilders. Measuring 6 feet 5 inches with a very broad skeletal frame with a massive top and narrow hips, his physique was symmetrical and the best developed parts were on the outside. We're talking about full calves and shoulders. Lundgren has continued his strength training and took care of his physical form pretty much until this point. Early in the May, the world heard the pretty dramatic news. On the In Depth with Graham Bensinger show, he admitted that since 2015 he had been fighting cancer. The fight was so serious that at a certain point doctors were even getting the actor ready for death, giving him 2 to 3 years to live. He heard the first diagnosis in 2015. That was when doctors found a lump in his kidney, which they were fortunately able to remove. Then they conducted a routine tissue biopsy, which confirmed that they had removed cancer. As a consequence of the surgery, Lundgren was suggested to undergo regular tests, initially every 6 months, then once a year. Until 2020, Dolph was fine. He even bragged about his perfect shape during that time, especially the 2017 sessions, during which he definitely didn't look like a typical 60-year-old, raised an array of questions about the actor's naturalness. During the pandemic, however, while he was in Sweden, he was bothered by an annoying reflux and overall reduced fitness. An MRI scan detected another few lumps in that area. Not all of them were operable. In total, the doctors found as many as 6 of them, which were then cut out. Then the doctors found one more lump on the liver. The change was apparently the size of a small lemon, due to which it was impossible to surgically remove it. That was when I realized it was something serious, admitted Lundgren. It was necessary to start a systemic treatment, or the so-called chemotherapy, which comes with numerous unpleasant side effects. The following year, filming started for the second part of Aquaman, as well as the 4th part of the Expendables, which entailed a trip to London. Despite the access to world-class specialists, the next diagnosis was far from positive. The doctor advised him taking a longer break and spending more time with his family. That was the exact moment when the doctor and the actor himself started getting ready for the worst. In that diagnosis, the actor had 2 to 3 years left, whereas Lundgren had a feeling that his prognosis could be way too optimistic. Between the shooting for both movies, the Swedish actor decided to get a second opinion. That was when a mutation was identified in the lump, which allowed to introduce treatment that was adequate and focused on the specific type of cancer. This yielded a positive result. The cancer started growing slower, and they were able to shrink most of the lumps found in the actor. The actor explained that he had spent the entire 2022 on treatments and observing the changes. He also underwent more surgeries in order to remove the remains of cancer tissue. Currently, the prognoses are constantly getting better, but the treatment is still ongoing, and according to the most realistic prognosis, we should be prepared for a remission of the cancer. On the positive side, today Lundgren says that he feels better than over the last 5 years, and the shooting for Netflix's The Witcher in South Africa, which he is in, is going really well. However, in an interview with Graham Bensinger, there is one thesis in particular that may significantly heat up the atmosphere. As it turns out, Dolph suspects the cause of the disease to be taking doping substances. I think that there may be some link between testosterone therapy and cancer. I was on steroids when I was younger, with breaks of about 10 years. Depending on the type of movie I was shooting, some of them were more focused on physicality. This confession is pretty bold for at least a few reasons. First of all, we all know that taking doping substances may have a very negative impact on health. There are also substances that showed carcinogenic potential in research. Nevertheless, while browsing the internet in search of a specific publication that would link cancer to taking testosterone, I couldn't find one that could be linked to liver, kidneys, or spine, which would make me all the more surprised if it was about the kind of doses that Lundgren talks about. That's because he mentions about the kind of around 150 milligrams of testosterone a week, which he describes as large. For the contrast, and likely for the sake of his PR, he compares them to the doses taken by bodybuilders back then, which he defines as from 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of testosterone, plus, as he described, different anabolic steroids on top of that. As we know, 150 milligrams of testosterone a week in some cases can be prescribed by a doctor to treat hypogonadism in men, and although probably a little less often in some guys with poorly reactive androgen receptors, sometimes even bigger doses get prescribed. When he mentioned taking them over 10 years, he also made it clear that he used so-called cycles. It's hard to say if that was really the case, but it makes me wonder myself why someone with such brilliant genes for doing sports, definitely not showing signs of lowered testosterone, would take doses in cycles that for most people would only cause going a little above the normal range. Even before the movie Rocky, his shape was always good enough for his natural testosterone level to quite probably exceed the range even on its own, which means that, in theory, 150 milligrams of testosterone a week could actually place him below his natural production as a person with brilliant genetics. So what's the point of flipping the whole endocrine system upside down for doses that wouldn't realistically bring him any major benefit? As you probably already expect, I call into question Lundgren's confession about his testosterone dosage, not only from the practical point of view, which I already mentioned, but also from, let's call it, the visual point of view. All we have to do is take a look at the shape that Dolph presented since his role in Rocky. When comparing him to the heavily anabolics-abusing Stallone, it doesn't seem at all like he wasn't as well built as him. And that's the same Stallone who in person was a good friend and workout partner of Arnold himself. Sadly, people from this exact circle are known for playing down the influence of steroids on their shape, or just denying them altogether. And we all know that those were the years when even the Olympics weren't entirely tested, and quite a lot of records from the 70s or 80s still haven't been broken to this day. Dolph was active in the fitness community basically the whole time, and although he no longer garners the same kind of interest in himself from it as he used to, when looking at his shape from 2017, for example, one could seriously question whether he is really a natural. The same goes for Stallone or Schwarzenegger, in fact. Maybe Lundgren is afraid to admit what types of substances he took back in the day. The kind of steroids that damage the liver are mainly those administered orally because of the C17 alpha alkylation. The methyl group protects the compound from breaking down exactly in the liver during the first pass. At the same time, it makes a particular preparation hepatotoxic. We know that during Arnold's days, metanabol, winstrol, and anavar were heavily used. At the same time, if the boys were basically from the same background and likely knew each other in person, one could assume that these could be the first-choice oral substances. Fast muscle mass growth, on the other hand, causes kidneys to increase their filtration load, causing a harmful level of stress in these organs. Doping doses of steroids significantly elevate blood pressure, which in turn damages the heart and the kidneys as well, which actually were never made with people weighing 250 pounds in mind. That's exactly almost what Dolph weighed at his peak. In people who abuse anabolic substances, another thing that might occur is kidney scarring, which indicates the so-called focal, segmented glomerulus hardening. I also wonder how popular it was among the action movie actors of the time to take diuretics that are not neutral to the kidney health. In photo shoots, such as the one with Dolph and Stallone, didn't they by any chance use patents copied from their friends at Gold's Gym? All of that is just my speculation. Above all else, I feel bad for the guy who will have to spend the rest of his life knowing that the cancer may return at any moment, and the fear of death is one of the worst. But since he's already opened the topic of steroids and their potential influence on his current health, wouldn't it actually be a good idea to reveal a little more on the topic? The more laconic his statements and the further they are from the actual circumstances, the less aware the society is on the topic of actual harm done by these substances. I don't think that if Dolph confessed today that he used to take 1,000 of testosterone instead of 150, anyone would think any less of his skills or the appeal of the movies he played in.